there, my YouTube audience. This is Paul, and today I'm joined by Dear Kristin from the YouTube channel Dear Kristin, such a self-explanatory name. And today we've got a very rare occurrence for a Myers-Briggs interview because I'm an ISTJ, she's an ESFP, at least I think she is. With all her skits, it's like, you could be anything. And
Yes.
we're going to take advantage of the fact that we're both dominant sensors, albeit the introvert extroversion is different, and we're both Catholics. And I'd like to think that it's pretty rare to get those two combinations into one YouTube interview.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
we were talking a little bit about just catching up and our preferences and how being across the world means that we say things a bit differently, but I think we've established that. So shall we, excuse me for 1 minute. I gotta whisper a little bit because the walls in this house are really thin.
Oh, okay.
So
All right.
take two. Hello, YouTube audience. Now I'm just gonna be a little bit quieter so that I don't disturb the people in the household. Can you still hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly fine.
Great.
Alrighty, so we're going to start with, in the function stack, both the ISTJ and the ESFP dominate with sensing. However, in the case of her, hers is extroverted sensing. In the case of mine, mine is introverted sensing. You all who have watched my channel know that I've done too many videos on what it's like to have introverted sensing, so let's hear from the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So, what do you know about introverted sensing, and how would you say that contrasts with your own extroverted sensing perspective?
Yes, although they're both sensing functions, it's a good question because I think there's a misconception, especially those who are sort of just getting into MBTI. It's very like, oh, you're a sensor, we're the same. Like we're going to be the same because we both have that S in our, in our type. But introverted sensing and extroverted sensing are so different. In my experience, I don't think I actually fully understood. And I mean, I don't think I fully understand still, but until I moved in with my current housemate, I have three housemates, but one of them is an ISTJ. And we get along very well in terms of like, I've noticed we have very similar a sense of humor that's quite similar. And also we can really have that like witty, quick banter quite easily. And I've noticed that it's quite a childlike sense of humor as well, like laughing at silly things, very like physical humor, very slapstick sort of style, which I really enjoy. And yeah, I don't really have to be anyone but myself with her, which is cool. Not that I make a habit of changing who I am, except when I'm on YouTube and acting out all the different times.
Well, from
Um,
what I've heard, introverted feeling is all about being authentic to oneself. And it's
yeah,
good that our function stacks have them so close to each other. So
yeah.
we can both feel like we're being authentic without someone saying, oh no, you're just doing that because you're on YouTube and you want views. It's like, if I wanted views, I'd probably get better editing skills.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so in terms of differences, well, SI just seems very about order, like order of the physical environment, which I think I do as an extroverted sensor. It's important to me, and I like naturally do it without even trying. Like I have order in my bedroom, and things are just clean. It's quite natural for me to keep that up. But with introverted sensing, that order just seems so much more important to them. It's like they need that order in their external environment in order to feel sort of peace within. That's my observation. Whereas, like, the order that I have in my external environment is very much just based on like personal preference or like just how I like to have things. But if it's messed up, it doesn't bother me. And I guess one of the things I've noticed about SI as well is it's very based on traditions and memories. Whereas for me, that's where I would clash with SI, I think, in that obviously I'm running with a perceiving function, which is just about gathering. So one thing I've noticed maybe like with SI, and please, you're so welcome to like correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems that there's like a preconceived judgment that has been brought onto situations about things, or they like someone who runs with SI might sort of see someone and like already take note of what they're wearing and the vibe that they're giving off or how they're conducting themselves, and then maybe subconsciously make a judgment about that. Whereas for me, if I'm walking into a situation, everything's just a blank slate. And if I see how someone's dressing, that I don't take that into consideration about their personality whatsoever. And that's not to say that one function is more judgmental than the others. It's just a tendency that I've noticed that is just very different. And when I'm talking to my ISTJ housemate, I cleared with her before I had this interview, by the way, that I could talk about these things. Sometimes she'll approach something and it'll just be like very black and white, like, this is how it is. And I will want to challenge that and be like, no, but like, why is it that way? And try and get her to like really explain why logically, or like get her in touch with that FI to explain maybe like how that ties into her passion or particular conviction, or maybe the logic that she's thought behind. Because to me, if I really have conviction about something, it's because my SE data has like, I've had enough SE data to sort of inform that conviction. Whereas before, like as a young person, when I didn't have a lot of SE data, I didn't have real convictions at all. Whereas with SI, it's very much like, so more black and white, this is how things are. And it's a bit more rigidity in that sense. Sorry, not more rigidity, because I do think with my convictions, I don't have as much rigidity because I've reached them with like that utter FI conviction. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it seems like, yeah, SE is just so much more adaptable because we're just about perceiving and gathering, data that could inform any truth or any circumstance.
So
I've
if
talked a
I'm,
lot. I'm
it's okay.
not sure if that makes sense.
Uh, I was going to say, if I'm understanding you correctly, it seems like your understanding of dominant sensing is that one is based on more of a what's come before, and one is more of like it's gathering in the moment. Because when
Yes,
I because when I approach a sensory situation, I'm always going to be contrasting it to something familiar. Like I might say, like today, I was walking to the lake and there was this couple there. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, it's my brother and my sister-in-law. I should go say hi. And then I stopped myself and said, no, if that were really my brother and my sister-in-law, they just had a baby. So she she's still got to recover. So why would they be here at the lake? So it turned out that it was just they happen to look very much like my relatives. But the fact that my mind first jumped to, oh my gosh, what are they doing here? It's
mm,
always going to contrast with that which I know. Whereas
mm,
it seems like your type could theoretically do that, but it's not going to be a basis for every single thing you do. Am I
yeah,
correct?
that's correct. Yeah, and I wouldn't really go through that interior mental process that you did in that example. I'd probably just glaze over them and not even pay attention to the couple. And I probably wouldn't even think they could be my brother and sister-in-law until they were like, hey, Kristin. I'm not like, it's just when I'm in the sensory world, I'm not interior whatsoever. I'm just gathering what's immediately in front of me. So I don't have a lot of thought processes going on most of my day, if I'm honest.
So it sounds like you would dive into things more as opposed to having that more introspective moment where you would think about what it is you're taking in, correct?
100%. That's exactly what it is. Dive into things without thinking. And that's also with that bottom NI. That's been like a struggle for me to stop and listen to that NI, which like a lot of the time now that I'm in my late 20s, like a lot of the time my NI can actually be right about a situation. It's just because I have enough data to support it, but it takes like temperance to actually stop and be like, no, we don't dive into the situation because our NI is telling us that this isn't going to end well for us.
I,
I
de-
love art.
I definitely want to touch on the fact that both of us have inferior intuition, but since most Myers-Briggs interviews tend to go in order of like first function, second function, I actually want to switch gears and go with let's talk about the fifth function and how
Oh,
that works. Now, I know not a lot of Myers-Briggs channels like to cover the bottom four in depth, but I've
mm,
been thinking about it a little bit just to like really know what my like insane weaknesses are. And for the ISTJ, their biggest weakness is extroverted feeling, not understanding group dynamics, accidentally hurting someone's feelings and be like, shoot, I should not have said that. That was super inappropriate. And
yeah.
so what I've learned about the fifth function, which for both of us to tell which one is which, whatever type of sensing you have, just flip the introversion, extroversion. So for you, it would be introverted sensing. For me, it would be extroverted. And the fifth function is the function that you're aware of its existence, but you often don't use it to make decisions. It's kind of just like, okay, moving on with my life.
Yeah,
So
100%.
with that understanding, how do you see introverted sensing being a fifth function in your stack?
Yeah, I've always thought my relationship with introverted sensing to be like quite healthy. Like I definitely feel it like around, and I do care about order in my immediate environment. But as I said earlier, it doesn't bother me if things aren't in order. But I'm quite good at naturally ordering things, or like I'm not like messy at all. I'll wake up and I like immediately make my bed. Don't have a problem making like having a routine in the morning and sticking to it. But I do it just because it works for just how my day is going to end up panning out. Not because I'm like, this is going to really bother me if I don't do this, later. If I forget to make my bed, or I like don't do the routine one day, that's not going to bother me. But I'm perfectly capable of keeping order and keeping I guess like a clean house, and just being considerate in public spaces, cleaning up after myself. And so yeah, I feel like I have like SI is totally around, but I like what you said about not using it to make decisions, because 100%, it's kind of just like my little buddy, but like it's like a companion for me, but I won't be like turning to it to be like, help me make this decision, because I don't really think of it as that important. But it is, of course, but like, because I use it, but I don't think of it as super important.
Well, if you
Yeah.
didn't have introverted sensing, you wouldn't be able to tell apart your memories from each other, because introverted sensing is all about taking familiar facts and information and organizing it. So like if say you went to a party and then you went to senior prom, the introverted sensing would say prom, party, both dancing, both with people, both involve getting dressed up. I see the connection.
Wow. Yeah, no. Wow. Okay. I'm
I mean, I
trying to think.
guess maybe that's a little bit of intuition in there too, but like every introverted sensor uses extroverted intuition. So maybe I just use my fourth function to a degree that just completely hurt your head.
No, actually, that's interesting, because would that be at play whenever I do something like, because I always thought it was my SE that was telling me, right, I have all this extroverted data of all these things I've done in my whole life, which has helped me to be like, okay, you know, I've said these things in the past that have hurt people, therefore I'm not going to say those things again. But I always thought that was like my SE data, but could that be like a SI at play when I'm like maybe choosing not to do something or doing something differently,
Hmm.
because I know from my memory that it doesn't, or maybe not an experience I've had, but maybe an experience that I've seen someone else have, and I've been like, therefore I shouldn't do that, or I'll use that experience when I'm giving advice to other people.
Possibly, but I think it would help to answer that if I contrasted how I would use fifth function extroverted sensing and then see if we can
Yes.
come up with some kind of correlation there. So
Yes.
for me, when I use extroverted sensing, I see it as like, the common stereotype that ISTJs notice everything. Like their eyes are constantly combing the environment. They never miss a detail.
Yeah.
Like you might be like, did you notice I cut my hair today? I'll be like, yup. And I also noticed exactly how much hair you cut. But
Wow.
one, they don't always see the need to point out everything they noticed, because then they'd talk a mile a minute if that were the case.
Yeah.
And the second thing is they don't see a need to engage in new sensory experiences for the sake of it. So, for example, an ESFP might be watching one of those point of view roller coaster rides on YouTube and be like, oh my gosh, this roller coaster is so cool. I just got to go see it. And then want to book a flight to Florida so they can go there. I would say, that's cool. I'm good. And then just stop there.
Yeah.
Or
No.
like if a friend says you want to go on a roller coaster with me, I'll be like, sure, that sounds fun. And then afterwards I'll be like, okay, my life is complete. I don't need to go on any more roller coasters. I had my fun. Time to go back to my good old routine.
Yeah. So it's the same thing. It's kind of like it's there as like a buddy, but you don't need it for any reason.
Yeah, like if I like I do watch a lot of point of view videos on YouTube, and when I see these rides, I'm just like, that looks cool, but I don't feel the need to have to go on those specific rides. Now, it is true that I do want to go to a water park on my bucket list, but I don't have an urge to do it right away. I don't have an urge for it to be like a specific kind of danger, like, you know, how some are like higher water slides, some are more like low key. I'm just like, I just want to go to a water park in general. I don't really care how it is. So,
Mm.
would you say that helps you to better figure out how to answer your earlier question?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it certainly helps in to understand that role of that fifth function. And I'm definitely going to be thinking a lot about this now because I've never talked. I like haven't really talked with someone who's, I guess, who runs with SI, who's as like you seem quite like you've studied this and like you've thought about this a lot. So it's good to talk about, I guess, how the SISE dynamic plays when it's like first and fifth function. Because when I've talked to people about MBTI, it's usually like intuitive types mostly. That
Yeah. Well, most of my friends are intuitives, and so a lot of times when I'm around another sensor, I'll just get so excited because it's like, finally, someone who actually appreciates reality.
Yes. Yeah, and as you were talking, I like your examples rang true to my experience as well because with my ISTJ housemate, she knows like if I stay in all day, my energy will be drained, and she's super into MBTI as well. So she'll be like, Kristin, like let's go out and let's have an experience. Like let's go grocery shopping together, and like we'll buy a coffee, and it'll be and like her just talking about it with excitement makes me excited to do it. But if it's that, like I really appreciate that, but I know it's not important for her necessarily, but she is totally capable of immersing herself in the moment with me, and she's like one of the best people to take along on those experiences. Like I wanted to watch the sunrise one day and I was like, I just knew she'd be down. Like it's not like with her she's going to really struggle to enter that extroverted sensing mind space, whereas like a lot of other people might be like, no, that's going to mess with the plan for the rest of my day, or like, but why do we have to do that, what's the underlying meaning, or like I need more notice to have to do this. But she's just so good, she is very good at being spontaneous. So and enjoying that sort of with me and super immersing herself in the present moment. And while we were out at the sunrise, like we weren't talking about anything deep, like we did sometimes, but like we were mostly just like, oh, it's so nice to be with a sensor, because we were like, look how beautiful that sunrise is, like it's just stunning, like oh look how like look at this water, isn't water just
Yeah,
fascinating?
I could see myself acting similar, but I've also remembered occasions where I might be with my intuitive friends and they're just like, doesn't the sunrise remind you of the infinite beauty of life itself? And I'm like, yeah, maybe, but that's not what I'm thinking about.
That's it. I think that's one of the things with sensors, and it sounds like you're a bit like this as well, is that just the ability to just completely take this reality, the tangible reality, and be just happy with that. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to go deeper than that. I don't need to talk about the meaning behind the sunset to be in love with life. You know, I look at the sunset and I'm like, this is, or the sunrise, and I'm like, this is incredible. And most of the time I'm like, this is proof to me that God exists. Like that's the, I'm like, how beautiful is God? You know? And I know
Yeah.
for other people, like I have said things like that. I was once on a walk with one of my INFP friends, and I said something along the lines of that. I was like, look at the intricate details of all these flowers and like this leaf, like isn't this just proof of God and how beautiful and how giving he is and like his love? And it wasn't really hitting home with the INFP as much as like another sense of time, maybe, perhaps, I don't know. People feel free in the comments to dispute this. But yeah, like a sense is just so happy to be like, yes, that's a sunrise, that's beautiful, life is good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so because I think I think now that you and I have hit on our mutual Catholicism, I think that brings up a point that I brought up in one of my most recent videos, which wasn't strictly Myers-Briggs, but it was like, how do I stay happy on YouTube? And one of the very last things I said was, let's just ignore the function stack and bring faith into it. And I think anyone who has strong faith can end up appreciating things that otherwise would be like unheard of for that type. Like some people have said, Paul, you must be a dominant introverted feeler because you're so in touch with your emotions, or you must be an ISFJ because you care about other people. And it's like, didn't Jesus ask us to do that? So
Yes.
wouldn't I be disobeying the Lord if I didn't at least try to develop my itty bitty extroverted feeling?
Yeah. Fascinating. I actually have just thought of a question that I would like to ask you
Go for
um,
it.
on that. Um, Obviously, as Catholics, we want to focus on growing in virtue, and and for me personally, understanding MBTI has helped me to understand my tendencies and maybe like general flaws. So, for instance, like SE, just classic, like let's experience this thing in the moment because it's gonna like give me pleasure, right? Without thinking of that long-term sort of consequence. So that's helped me to be like, okay, that's a tendency that I have. I have to acknowledge that. I have to understand that, and not try and deny that. That's going to help me realize those areas that I have to grow in virtue. So, does that ring true for you? Has MBTI helped, in a sense, for you to be able to see what sort of virtues you need to specifically focus on? And if you could speak into that like a little bit.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because, and I hate using cliche examples, but I feel like it segues so perfectly into your question. So,
Mm.
obviously, all of you that are watching this know that 2020 was the year that the coronavirus, no, I'm not going to be politically correct on this channel. I'm going to say what I want. The coronavirus hit out, and they had to cancel mass for pretty much the entire world for a while.
Yeah.
And all my life, I've been taught, if you miss Mass deliberately, then it's a mortal sin. Obviously, there are exceptions, like when you can't get to Mass or when you're sick. But in a pandemic, that's like a whole new situation that none of us have ever experienced unless you're secretly 125 or something. But
Mm.
like, how is the Pope supposed to react? Obviously, he's going to have to try to think outside the pre established box and say, okay, God said whatever is loosed on earth is loosed in heaven. This is a situation where I need to do some loosing and say, in this situation, which is unprecedented, it would be safer to avoid going to Mass. And so my introverted sensing that loves its order and stability had to say, okay, I'm just going to have to get used to not going to church every Sunday. I'm going to have to make that a part of my routine, which in turn means developing the extroverted intuition that I am so often afraid of.
Mm. Yeah, that makes complete sense. And it's so interesting how that like really hit you in that way. Um,
It didn't hit me as hard as my feeling type friends. They were like weeping and saying, I need Jesus. But I was like, I mean, I can technically get Jesus through prayers of spiritual communion, but
yeah.
it is nice to have that physical, tangible piece of bread because I'm constantly thirsty. And the Catechism teaches that the Eucharist is food for both the soul and the body. So a lot of times, like when I'm legitimately hungry or thirsty, the Eucharist has helped me like hold off until my next meal. So like I'd be like, ooh, food, I'm hungry, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
prayers of spiritual communion, yes, it's cool, but it doesn't, obviously you're not getting that sensory sensation. So I imagine you would struggle with it much harder than me being a dominant extroverted sensor.
Yeah, I mean, I love Mass because it's being physically present, and I've had so many beautiful grace filled experiences being present at Mass, and like actually receiving the Eucharist, like, is always just very special for me because it's, yeah, that sensory experience of receiving the body of Christ. So yeah, coronavirus was hard for me in terms of not being able to go to Mass, but at the same time, I didn't go through that deep panic of like, this is disrupting the order or the tradition of how things are going. I'm such a perceiver, like most 90% of the time, that I'm just like, okay, this is the current situation. I'm going with it. This is how it is. And I'm just like, the Lord loves me. He knows my intention of heart. Like, he's not gonna be upset with me that if I like this is the situation right now. At the end of
Yeah.
it's about intention of heart with the Lord. Like, that's so clear. So I was weirdly excited to. I was not excited to miss Mass, but I was excited for coming up with new ways to connect with the Lord. You know what I mean? And I did, because I went on daily walks in the morning. I made that part of my routine because I got like so almost depressed being in lockdown as an extroverted sensor,
I
that I
can
had
imagine.
to, yeah, that I had to make those, I had to actually have something to get me up in the morning. Otherwise, I wasn't going to get up. And one of my beautiful friends, like, she called me every morning at 8 and we prayed together, and it was so wholesome. So that to make sure that I was up out of bed. And so that was new in and of itself. Like, having a connection with a friend in the morning and praying over the phone. And then I went for a walk, and then through nature, I was able to connect with the Lord. So yes, we weren't able to go to mass, and that was really terrible. But at the same time, I was able to connect with the Lord in with SE in other ways, like through nature and through communication with my friends. And then, yeah, like when we did go back to mass, it was just like, you probably are the same. It was just so much more special. And you just felt like you'd been like thirsty for so long, and you were getting.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of felt like that, but on the other hand, the fact that we had to wear masks while we were doing it was like, yeah, I didn't have to wear a mask the last time I was at mass, so this is very different.
Yeah, true. Yeah, very
So
interesting.
it was a little bit of like that contrasting again of like, yeah, this mass I wear a mask, this mass I don't. There's a disconnect here, and my introverted sensing is a bit annoyed.
That's so funny.
So before I forget, I wanted to touch on the fact that both of us are not only sensing types, but inferior intuitives, because this type of situation hardly ever happens. Like, I think if I can list off the top of my head, I may only have like two good friends of mine who are sensors, and most of them don't even know Myers-Briggs that much. So it's like I can't even appreciate it. So I
You want to
really
tell
want to.
them, like, you want to tell them about their sensing, but they don't want to listen.
No, it's more of they'll just nod and be like, okay, okay, yeah, I don't like thinking deeply either. They'll kind of just like agree with what I'm saying, but they won't be able to say like, yeah, totally, my tertiary NI is just not having it. They'll just agree with me.
Oh, that's
So
nice.
so for those of you in my audience that somehow haven't watched my info dumping videos, which I find surprising, ISTJs like myself, we have inferior extroverted intuition, which means that we're afraid of things that are changed or things that are not feeling exactly like that past experience, being like, it's different, what the heck? But your type has inferior introverted intuition. So would you like to explain your personal experience with, I guess I'd like to make it a dual question. First of all, what do you think is the blessing of having two inferior intuitives, and like what does that mean in general? But then like how do you specifically single out your introverted intuition over my extroverted intuition?
Yeah, interesting. Um, hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can only speak from experience with my ISTJ housemate, and I feel like with her, it's I can really value, because she does tap into that extroverted intuition whenever I need help with something. Because I also have, I mean, this, I don't mean to bring up another function, but like I also have my TI as my blind spot, right? So, because it's my seventh function. So I'm incapable of sitting by myself and analyzing and logicizing by myself. I need to like externally process it somewhere. So I'll often go to her and talk to her. And she's so good at coming up with different possibilities in the moment of how things could be that I just had never thought of. Like, so she does tap into it, her extrovert intuition, but I've noticed it is also an insecurity of hers, because when she has to, like for a uni assignment or for her own maybe life experience, she has to now come up with those extroverted intuitive possibilities. She doubts her ability to do so because suddenly the pressure is on her to do so for her life and her experience. But when I come up to her and I'm like, can you help me with this thing? And there's no pressure, and she's just like being a friend. She's so good at it. But because it's an insecurity, because it's that bottom function, um, she doesn't realize she's so capable. And I think that rings true for me, because my insecurity is with NI. My insecurity is that I'm always trusting my external data and not trusting my intuition. And my my insecurity is that I don't even have intuition. Like the amount of times I've said like, I don't know what's going on under the surface here. I can't foresee these possible realities. Someone help me with this. And my friends have told me, like, your intuition is actually really good. You just don't trust it. And then they'll list experiences why. They'll list some experiences wherein I've like done something where I was, without realizing it, following that intuition, and I ended up being right. But I, at the time, had doubted the intuition, but I ended up being right in following it. And they'll be like, see, you do have it, but I just don't think I do. So in those two examples, I feel like that really emphasizes how that fourth function seems to be an insecurity and something we really aspire to be, because I have used, I try not to do it, but I've definitely used, like, I guess, slightly self-deprecating language about my lack of ability to like intuit and stuff, because it's something that I aspire to and place such value on. And I am drawn to dominant NI users as a result. Like, I admire that in them.
I definitely can't relate to that, because when I'm around dominant introverted intuitives, I'm just like, say what? Why are you guys speaking gibberish?
Really?
Really, I will sometimes say, like, you're getting into INFJ mode again. I can't understand a word of it. Can you please speak English?
Oh,
Maybe
that's so.
that's maybe that's just the thinking preference over feeling of like not being as concerned about hurting people's feelings.
That's so interesting, because when I'm around extroverted intuitive dominance, I have the same thing. I'm like, okay,
Oh,
stop.
wow.
I'm like, can you stop just like idealizing and talking about concepts and jumping from one to the other without like finishing this one first? Like, come back to the first one. Let's finish it. Let's chisel it down to an NI like nugget before we jump onto other things. And I'll literally be like that same thing. I'll be like, can you just please bring it to reality somehow so that I can understand? Like, these concepts mean nothing if you're not grounding them in reality. So that's so interesting, the fact that you feel that way about NI users and I feel that way about NE users. Because when I talk to NI users, I feel like they're speaking my language, because they're coming to that, they're touching on that fourth function that like rings true to me and that I actually use a lot of my day without realizing it. And so I feel like INTJs and ENTJs especially, because they have all four of my functions just in different orders, like we speak the same language a lot of the time.
Yeah, I would say that that's how I'm like around ENFPs, because three of my really good friends are ENFPs, and sure, they may be kind of like an extreme version of me that's like, if I were more okay with showing my silly side and had not as good of a memory and like forgot what I had for breakfast. But I also find that at the same time, I can understand where they're coming from. Like, I can say, okay, I may not agree with your decision, but at least I'm comprehending the thought process behind it. Or,
Mm.
like, if they are like, hey, let's try this new thing, I'll be like, I can kind of see the fun in that. And because I'm understanding where they're coming from, I'm more willing to try it out than, say, if my INTJ best friend is like, check out this game I just made, Paul. It's all about time travel. I'm like, time travel? Games? You lost me.
Wow. Gosh, this is actually so interesting, because I've never thought about that, like the idea of that eighth function really annoying us.
Well, I've always called in my info dumping videos, which I'm sure you're going to want to binge watch after this. I don't get paid for my videos, so this isn't self promo. This is more of like self talking.
Yeah, no, I love it.
Um, when I remind me what the question was again, my brain just did an oopsie.
That eighth function
Oh,
and like,
yes. So the way I've talked about the eighth function in my info dumping is I've described it as the migraine function, where if you see someone who's using it in the dominant, using it too much, your brain literally can't take it. And you're just like, okay, I just need to go and have a pizza. I need to go and get a drink because this is just too much. Like one time, I was really determined to develop my intuition. And so I thought, I'll go to a philosophy meeting. Oh, that was a nightmare. It was so boring and so confusing that I was literally feeling like I needed to take an aspirin, and I don't get headaches very much, so that's saying something. And not only that, but like the girl that was running the philosophy meeting was like glaring at me every time. I was like, why are you guys asking so many questions? Why does it matter if 2 plus 2 equals 4? Does that really help pay your bills? And then at the end, I was talking to my INTJ best friend, and I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to that again. He's like, well, I don't know, Paul. I really liked what you had to say. I'm like, you did? He's like, yeah, because the fundamental question in philosophy is asking why. So I
yeah.
said, I'm pretty sure you and I are coming at this from totally opposite perspectives here.
I also love how your brain, this is maybe your SI brain, went like, okay, I need to develop my intuition. Philosophy class. Like, just that, like, oh, this is the only explanation, this is the only route to take to develop that. I'm sure you didn't think it was the only route, but for me, I totally wouldn't approach it like that. When I try to develop my NI, I just try to listen to that voice within me. I like would never think to like go to like a philosophy class. I actually studied theology for 2 years. I found it very fascinating, but one thing I couldn't like handle was when in class we went off topic on all these tangents that would just kept like going and going and going. I was like, bring it back, please bring it back. It's like the difference between NI and NE is actually so huge. Like my sister's an ENFP, and what you were saying about the migraine function, I actually like that. I like that word. I don't know if you coined it. Did you coin that yourself?
Yeah, actually, I did. Because I
I
was
like that.
thinking about what I was feeling when I was seeing a bunch of people using it. And I said, I have a migraine, so therefore I'm going to call it the migraine function. And in fact, I coined it while we were doing this meeting. Like when I said it to you, that was the first time I had used that phrase.
Oh, really? There we go. Yeah, I think that's great. I wonder if it was particularly challenging for you in that philosophy class because philosophy can sometimes go really deep into just one question, and whether you would have preferred it if it was more diving and jumping from
I
things like.
think I would have preferred it if it was something that I was already interested in and that was actually relevant. Like if someone said, for instance, why is it that we go to Mass besides just following the catechism? Is there a deeper reason to sit your butt in a pew? And especially if you went to my old church, if the air conditioning is not working and so you're hyperventilating, is there a legitimate reason why you should be putting your health at risk just to get what looks like a piece of bread? That would be the kind of philosophy that I'd say, okay, it has a practical application and it's worth talking about this in case we get into an argument with an atheist or a
Mm,
Protestant who's like, I believe in God, but I don't believe in going to church. So
mm,
it gives us the opportunity to defend ourselves as opposed to just the usual, because the church says so, as like a cop out answer.
yeah, no, that's good, and
But
I
if
resonate.
but if it's something like, why is it that we have hair? I'll be like, because we have hair follicles. Why does it matter?
So fair. Yeah, that's so fair. I'd be more inclined to jump into the hair thing purely because it's actually tangible, real data that I can like observe. But like when someone dives into like some hypothetical that has no relevance and would like literally never happen, unless it's some interesting like moral dilemma. I love moral dilemmas, but like something that I'm just like, really like, okay, I can't understand what you're saying unless you ground it in some kind of practical example, you know. So, but I will love, maybe it's that NI, but I love going really deep into, yes, like one specific topic and talking about lots of different perspectives on that topic to get like an answer to one particular thing and to bring out that NI golden nugget, and rather than starting to talk about one thing and then losing interest in chasing something else. Because with my ENFP sister, and we're very close, and she gets a migraine with the SE. Like if she's got too much SE going out, and there's no like connection with people behind the SE, she's like, "Why do I have to do this?" um,
Yeah.
but when we're in a conversation and we're talking about deep stuff, which we do often, or like my life experience, I'll be trying to get at like I'll start like a story, and I'll be trying to get to like some NI conclusion, and then she'll like take the most random insignificant detail and decide to chase that and like lead into a monologue about her thoughts about society or something. And my brain, and this is understanding MBTI, has allowed me to extend grace to her in those moments and be like, oh yeah, like, and listen to her. But in my mind, I'm like, oh, gotta come back to that point, like bring it back, bring it back. So sometimes because she understands MBTI too, so I can just be like, look, is it okay if I kind of finish that point I was trying to get at before we jump? And then, of course, because she's ENFP, she's like, yeah, of course. But then we forget what she was trying to say later.
Well, I think for me, it wouldn't be so much annoyance if I were to see ENFPs, would be more so a fascination. Like one time, um, I was hanging out with two of my ENFP friends who, God bless their souls, are now married to each other.
Oh, two
And
ENFPs. Love that.
sorry,
Sorry, just I was just thinking about the idea of two ENFPs being married to each other.
it is pretty chaotic when they come over, that's for sure. But so I said, okay, guys, for our hangout, let's go hiking. So we got there and I said, all right, did you guys bring good hiking equipment? And they brought a tennis ball, a beach ball, and a frisbee. And I'm like, how does any of that relate to hiking? They're like, because we thought it might be fun to play with the beach ball. But then I said, but why'd you bring a tennis racket if you didn't bring a tennis ball?
Oh
And I
wow.
said, maybe we should get walking sticks. They're like, oh, we need walking sticks? I should have thought of that. And I just
Like
found that it was a source of hilarity as opposed to
yeah.
like, oh my gosh, you guys are annoying because it's not like it ruined our trip. It was more so just I hadn't thought like that a beach ball could correlate with walking in the woods.
No, look, to be honest, that stuff would never annoy me because I actually relate to that as a perceiver. I think that's more the EP quality because I also 100% do the same thing. Like I'll be out on my way out the door and I'll grab something and be like, this could be useful for the thing we're going to, or I'll be like, what's a new interesting way we could do something. Like I would totally bring a beach ball hiking because I'd be like, there might be a time when we're like stopped and taking a rest and we can play a cool game with it or something. So I love that when an EP is around in that sense. But yeah, specifically with ENFPs, it's more so the tangent jumping that
Yeah.
really drives my gears.
So you've mentioned a couple of times so far that you're, a true perceiving type. But I think what a lot of people don't realize about Myers-Briggs is that the IJs are also perceiving types because they lead with either sensing or intuition, which are perceiving functions. So, do you ever find yourself feeling like, yay, mutual perception when you're around IJ types, or do you feel like it's a different kind of perceiving?
It is for sure because I don't feel like I'm around perceiving types when I'm with IJs because that perceiving function is introverted. So it's going on within them. And the way it comes out in the world can be considered more controlling than like free flowing and gathering and adaptive. So, but their extroverted function is what I will see first and experience. And it's only when getting to know the person on a deeper level will I see that perceiving function come out more and more. But it's within themselves. So I don't know what it's like to have that going on constantly as your dominant function, that perceiving, but it's an interior perception function. So it comes out so differently.
Yeah, I would say the best way to describe it would be you play video games, right?
Yes.
Have you ever looked into a video game soundtrack and just like browsed through all the songs and been like, ooh, this one's my favorite, and then just decided to listen to it on loop?
Yes, I have.
Or or do you have an iPod where you have like your favorite songs listed in an album?
Yes.
That's basically introverted sensing in a nutshell, is constantly compartmentalizing things that we like and putting them in their place. So for example, if I want to listen to the soundtrack of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, but I don't have the game with me, I'll just say, okay, let me just recall all of the songs from the Kid Icarus franchise. Okay, I feel like listening to Magnus's theme in it. Put the tape in, start listening.
In your head,
And
you listen to it.
yeah, and you're doing that 24/7, constantly thinking, how is this? Oh my gosh, that reminds me of this that was 10 years ago. And it sounds like intuition when I'm describing it because it's constantly looking for connections, but instead of looking forward like the intuitives do, it's looking backward. So trying to see patterns that existed to try to figure out what to do now. The future,
Uh,
the
yeah.
future doesn't exist to an ISTJ if they're not
Yes.
told like what the future is going to bring. Like if you ask, what are you going to do in 20 years? I'm like, I don't even know what I'm going to do in 3 days.
Yes. That is such a good description of it, how you've just said. I don't think I've ever had it summarized so succinctly as you've just done that. And it's probably because you speak my language as a sensor. I like need it very clearly spelled out for me rather than in these theoretical sort of ways. That like I very much feel like I understand SI a lot better since talking, like having talked to you about this now. And the way you said that intuitive look forward, SI looks backward, but like the future still doesn't exist to you. Very good description.
I
And it makes
mean, It's a bit of an exaggeration to say the future doesn't exist at all, but if it
Yeah.
does exist, it tends to be based on something that's highly likely. So, for example, if I think about like, okay, this June coming up, it'll be hot. It's like pretty much every June is hot. So that's something that I can reliably say will happen unless, I don't know, there's a 1% chance that the sun shuts down and the whole world freezes over, but that's not likely to happen. So, in the same way,
Yeah.
if it's like, hey, in a week I'll be able to see my friend Monica again, but she lives all the way on the other side of the state, that's not likely, so it won't cross my mind.
Yeah. Well, it's the same as SE. Like the way you say tomorrow doesn't exist, I completely relate. It's like, yeah, for me, tomorrow doesn't matter because it's not the real moment, the real moment. So it's very hard for me to like chisel into that NI and do things today that are going to inform or help my future self, when to me the future self isn't real. It doesn't matter. Like I'll deal with that when I come to it.
Yeah, my future self is basically, I think at the moment I'm thinking about what my plans will be on the 25th because my friends and I have already made plans to hang out. It's something we do every year. And, my birthday is coming up. My birthday is the 20th of this month. So this is like a great happy birthday present from you.
Oh, nice.
Definitely. And so I'm just thinking like everybody has a birthday. Every birthday comes once a year. This is a normal thing. And so I'm confident to say that this is likely what will happen on the 25th. But the intuitives, like especially the INTJs and INFJs, will say like, okay, like one of my favorite examples of where I just find it laughable is when my INTJ is talking about a girl he likes, and he'll be like, "Well, I got to make sure that she's going to be a stay-at-home mom, and I got to figure out how we're going to take care of the kids and what she's going to do about her career." And I'm like, "Next, you're going to tell me you're going to plan out your wedding." He's like, "Well, yeah, I already have this wedding planned out and this wedding," and I'm like, "Get a girlfriend first, then worry about the wedding."
I love that. It's like there's this very practical problem, that obstacle that you need to overcome first before you can speculate about those things.
I
That
mean,
is, you don't.
to be fair, I kind of get where he's coming from because he also has extroverted thinking and introverted feeling. And obviously, both of us are going to want to make sure our values are represented. So
Mm,
if he happens to believe that the only girl he can marry is a stay-at-home mom, then he's going to want to make sure that that is upheld. I personally don't believe that, and so it's called introverted feeling because it's a personal database. I'm sure you know better than me because it's secondary for you. So I think to a
yeah.
certain extent, he wants to make sure that he doesn't date a girl that will violate that inner code of his.
Yeah,
Whereas
fair
I,
enough.
whereas I think for you, you would actually, I'll transition that into a question. So because for you, that introverted feeling, extroverted thinking is the other way around, how would you approach a situation differently than myself or my INTJ friend that I just gave you an example of?
Yeah. I relate to that idea of that code of ethics that's inseparable from my person. So I know what convictions I have, and I'm not going to budge on those. And um, I know maybe what I want in a partner or a friend, but that's more based on my SE data through having experienced certain relationships where something was missing or lacking or something was problematic, and being like, okay, I can learn from that and now bring it into this. But the difference is, I'm not saying like, I'm not going to be like, I need this person who does this and has this type and this quality, and they need to be this kind of father to my hypothetical children. I don't do that. It's more just like, today I make the decision today that's going to inform those convictions and morals and ethics, which is again that perceiving, extroverted perceiving function. I'm like, whatever. Like if a nice person comes along and I find them interesting and I want to be their friend, I'll be their friend. It's like, it doesn't, I'm not like, but they need to have this quality because in the future, this is something I need to make this kind of friend because this is the kind of person I want my future children to be around in the future. I don't, that's never going through my head. It's like, does
Hmm.
this, does, is, yeah, like, am I resonating with this person right now? Are they challenging my beliefs and my convictions? Are they accepting of who I am as a person? Great, let's be friends. And I never think past that.
So it sounds like whereas he wants to make sure he has that um, that fail safe, like almost like a parachute. Like he has to be certain that all of this is planned out before it happens. You figure it out the moment it happens.
Yes. And I'll deal with it when it has the consequences or whatever, like in the future.
What about your extroverted thinking? Like, I know because it's tertiary, that means that ESFPs aren't these total illogical dimbos that like cry over the silliest thing and can't reason their way out of a paper bag. I know that you have a good degree of, well, obviously, we've actually just met, so I wouldn't say you personally, but I know ESFPs in general are actually like secret geniuses. Like, it's almost like the expression like they've come out of the closet and they've revealed, I'm actually smart underneath all that fluff. So how would you describe your extroverted thinking being in the tertiary position? Do you see it as like how I
Yeah.
described it, or do you see it as like even more developed?
Yeah. 100%. It's kind of like where I'm running with SE like 90% of the time. Actually, I can't do percentages on the spot. I don't like it would be based on nothing. But I feel like I'm running with SE most of the time. And when I'm running with SE, I'm just like super chill, go with the flow, whatever, taking things as they come. But when there's something I care about or something I need to get done, I switch into that NITE mode. And basically, TE just takes over. Like I can't be that chill, adaptable, go with the flow, awesome person and be that TE at the same time. It's very hard for me. If I have something I need to do and get done, I'm not going to be like, yo, but let's, take it slow and let's, hang out and chill and like talk about your feelings at the same time. I'm like, no, I am in TE mode right now. I'm getting this thing done. I know the way to do it. And that's again where virtue comes in. I'm like, right, I know that's my tendency. In those moments when I really am trying to get something done effectively, I need to be more charitable in those moments to people who get in my way there. So that SE informs the TE in the sense that I'm really good at manipulating my environment and being observant and knowing how to get something done really quickly. So the SE and TE work together. But I feel like when I hit the TE, it kind of takes over from SE for a moment, just until I've done the thing. And then I'll switch back into SE for like the
So
rest of
if so if I'm understanding you correctly, a good example of this would be this discussion here, because I am not the most technically advanced guy in the world. So you said, I'll take over, I'll get it done. So it's not just a hypothetical YouTube interview, it's a real interview with split screen and recording and everything. Because obviously, if you were just being extroverted sensing, it's like, I'll talk to Paul when I get to it. It's like there had to be
yeah.
at least some level of actually doing it.
Yeah, I think yes, exactly. But I mean, the SE was running the show most of the time because I was like, I will put this off until, it's time and, I'll get round to it. But this is the thing, like, because I know my TE and I have the data telling me that I can get things done, I know that I will get it done. So if someone's relying on me for something and I tell you I can do it, it's because I know that I can do it and I will get it done. There's this stereotype of ESFPs being really flaky and like, which I totally get and understand why that stereotype is there. But we are totally capable of like, I personally, if I know someone's relying on me or anyone else is dependent on me for anything, I'm not going to be late. I'm going to be like finding the best ways to actualize things for them. When I was an English teacher in South Korea for 2 years, and that job was so strenuous, it required me to be in that TENI like most of the time, and I was never late on like submitting reports. I was always able to be organized so that I was able to live the best life while I was over there. And that was like those were the years where I really really tapped into that. Like I actually recorded videos of myself talking at that time in my life, and I showed my housemate and she was like, you seem like a different person. You seem like you could be an INTJ in these videos. So it's so interesting. And it's important to realize that we are totally capable of tapping into that subconscious personality.
I think I think that's a good point, because my friend and I were talking the other day about, is it possible to be other types besides your own? And I don't think that's technically possible because of how the function stack is, but I have heard examples of where, like, on the general descriptions, without talking about the functions, they will talk about, like, this type has an exceptional ability to blank
Mm.
when a crisis calls. Like, for example, take my type. Two examples I can recall in particular are, they say ISTJs are usually reluctant to take leadership and top of the ladder type jobs, but if they're forced to, they're surprisingly good at it and can come across as ESTJs because they're forced to be. But in their natural mindset, they'd be a lot more calm and soft spoken. And in the
Mm,
same way, they said if you put an ISTJ in with like their best of buddies and someone that they're totally comfortable with, they'll have this really wild, offbeat sense of humor that you often don't get from them on a daily basis because they're usually stereotyped as being robotic and always so serious and straight-necked. So in that respect, you're seeing ESTJ mode when they're forced, ENFP mode when they're comfortable, and I guess if you want to even go deeper, you could see an ISFP or INFP mode when the ISTJ realizes that it's okay to tell people how you're feeling about things. Because I
yeah.
remember for a long time that was really hard for me, was how to express like what's going on the inside. And then I got to the point where I'm like, it's okay to be vulnerable and it's actually more scientifically healthy, which is probably where you'll start laughing because I had to have a logical reasoning to get to the realization that that was okay. I had to study science and I had to study like what causes chest pains and what causes volcanic tempers and say, oh,
Mm,
so because my introverted feeling is tertiary, that's causing me actual problems. Maybe I should be emotional then.
yeah, yeah, I love that.
Whereas
And
I
I think,
think it might have came more natural to you, I would imagine.
oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm an open book with my feelings. Like people, even when people don't ask, I'm like, yo, so hear about this conviction that I have right now, or this thing that I'm going through. Um, yeah, but that's so interesting. And a lot of people will say, actually, I think I'm this type. I think I've changed because I'm so much more extroverted now. And I'm with you. Like technically, I firmly believe you can't. Like I could never imagine a reality where I wasn't running with SE. Like a reality where I changed that running function. No, it's just not possible. It's been my whole life. I couldn't change that if I tried.
I mean,
It's
I
just
totally agree. Like, introverted sensing for me is so annoyingly powerful that that's actually what helped me discover that I was an ISTJ in the first place. Because
yeah,
when I first when I first heard about Myers-Briggs, I didn't know about the functions, and all I knew was like it's different ways to categorize someone's personality. So I got ESTJ the first time, and I'm like, I guess that must be what I am. And I thought, okay, well, I mean, I'm a fairly outgoing person. I don't mind talking on the phone. I can talk to people just fine, so I must be an extrovert. Then I looked at the dictionary, and then I looked at what the other ESTJs were saying, and I was just constantly butting heads with them, saying things like, why are you guys being such insensitive jerks? Stop being so mean to everyone. They're like, that's not mean, that's just talking. Or
yeah,
I'll say, like, guys, we should maybe introspect about this a little more instead of jumping to conclusions. And like, since when does an ESTJ do that?
yeah.
So
That's so
I
interesting.
began to realize like maybe the fact that I am like actually nice by their standards means that the feeling would be a little bit higher up. Of course, they
Yeah,
tried to say, oh, you must be an ESFJ, to which I said, no, the introverted feeling is, or introverted sensing is just too strong. And so
yeah,
basically it narrowed down to either ISFJ or ISTJ. And then what really helped narrow it down was looking at the bottom four functions and
yeah,
realizing, is it introverted thinking or introverted or extroverted thinking or extroverted feeling? That's the blind spot. Definitely extroverted feeling because I've lost track of how many times people have like said, oh my gosh, how could you have said that? And I'll be like, say what? What did I say? And they'll
yeah.
say, don't you realize that that was super offensive? And I'll be like, no, why didn't you tell me that was offensive?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's why MBTI is so helpful to be able to understand people's differences. What you've just described is the journey I went through with my housemate. We all thought she was an ESTJ when we first met her, but everything you just said about like that FE blind spot and like that FI being a little bit higher rang true. And eventually, like we typed her as ISTJ. It just didn't sit with me that she was running with TE rather than SI, because living with her over a long period of time, it's not an extroverted function, so I didn't see it immediately. What I was seeing immediately was her TE, but I realized like, no, that's not actually governing her like most of the time. Her SI is just so strong, the way that she cares about these little things and the way that she holds on to these memories. Like memories are so important to her. So what
Oh,
you
yeah.
described is like what happened when we like realized we typed her wrong, but it only came through discovering the functions, because if you just go through the letters, it's easy to be like, yeah, she's an ESTJ. She's super good at being like talkative and engaged with people when she cares. But that's because because she cared about them and they were in her interior world and she loved them. So yeah, so interesting.
Now, if I'm understanding you correctly, I believe you made a video recently about your housemates as types. And in that video, I remember you saying one was an ESTJ, one was an ENFP, and one was an ENTJ. Now, if that video was made a while ago, is this housemate that you thought was ESTJ, you've discovered she's actually ISTJ?
Yes, and quite recently. So since that video.
Ah, so that video is already outdated, even though you haven't been on YouTube for that long.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
it's
hilarious.
it is, isn't it? I
That
think
isn't,
no, go on.
that is very nice for like, I mean, I presume you and I are going to have interactions in the future because you said you like video games. I like video games. Oh my goodness. But I definitely think like the fact that you have a roommate that's my type is going to make it so that if I end up being stupid or saying something rude, you'll be like, it's okay, it's okay. I understand. Don't worry. I'm used to how you guys talk.
Yeah, I mean, I have actually a few ISTJs in my life, and I must say they are very easy for me to get along with.
That's good
Um,
to hear because we are actually perceivers despite having J's. So I think that really helps because both of us have that like let's observe first, talk
mm,
later. And I get really annoyed when I'm around the judging types because it just seems like they're constantly yelling, constantly on edge, and constantly bothered by stuff. Whereas I like to think, should I be bothered or am I just in a mood right now? And if
mm.
I am in a mood, I'll say, snap out of it.
Sorry, you broke up there. Could you repeat what you said? Just that last sentence.
When I'm in a bad mood, I'll just say snap out of it, and then I will because I'll say it's not worth it to be upset right now. Whereas I think the judging types would just say like, I'm upset, ah! And it just drives me crazy.
Yeah. So actually, that reminds me of something that I was trying to get at, wanted to get at earlier, but then I went on a tangent. Classic. But this is the NI coming back and being like, finish the point, Kristin.
Right.
So about like manifesting as presenting as different types and how you're not actually really changing in your brain, but you're learning that exact thing of like growing in virtue in a sense, if you want to call it, of being like, no, this is a blind spot I know that I have, therefore I need to um, act more sensitive in this area or this way. And I truly believe that a type can present as its dual. So the ENFP has your functions but flipped. So
That's right.
you would be able to present as an ENFP sometimes without even realizing it.
Oh yeah.
And I can kind of see right now how that could even be the case. Like, I think because you're so energized right now, but that's exactly right. Like, you understand yourself and you've been like, right, I know I need to rest before this interview so that I'm really energized and can, bounce off this ESFP
That
energy that this.
is that is true because I remembered saying to myself like, okay, I'm going to be with an ESFP. I'd better be prepared. So I took a really long nap. I, played my video games in the basement by myself and I like basically didn't talk to anyone. But like I can also
Mm.
see what you meant by having that like sometimes coming across as an ENFP because when I'm around my sister, I think I think like I just go full blown ENFP mode. Like if my sister is grumpy, I'll just be like, "Aw, can I turn your phone upside down, you little grumpy puss?" Or I'll be like, "Hey there, my friend. How is your amazing day going?" And I'll start like going and like just do all the silly random stuff that I wouldn't do to anyone else.
Yeah, exactly. And that's because your functions, those two functions at the bottom, come naturally to you. They do. You tap into them a lot. It's just so people are like, oh, you can change your type. But I'm like, no, the cognitive functions, it means that like sometimes the bottom ones take over a little bit. It doesn't mean your natural stack, the order of your stack is actually changing. But I have a theory that you could present as a lot of types. As you said, you could even present as INFP sometimes. But you probably could never present as an ENFJ, ESFJ, ISFJ, or INFJ because of that extroverted feeling that's your blind spot. Because
Yeah, I'd
you can't.
probably I'd probably come across as either forced or that I'm using someone else as an example and just mimicking them like a parrot.
Yeah, but extroverted feeling is all about as well just naturally kind of knowing and understanding what people need. And that's something that you like, if it's your blind spot, you're just not able to do, right? So even if you can present as an empathic person and you learn those behaviors, you're not actually really coming across in that authentic way. So it'd be way harder for you to present as those types, I think. Just as for me, coming across as an INTP or an ISTP, running with that TI blind spot of mine, not possible.
I bet you have to like stop your laughter when you're doing those skits.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, look, I can act externally in the way that I've observed INTPs to act in their face. That's what I do in my videos. But in my actual personality, I would never be able to just exist
Yeah.
in the
I
eye of the
th
world.
I think I get what you're saying because I also do 16 types videos, albeit I try to make mine on a specific subject. Like I try to make it based on either video games or mission trips because so many YouTubers do 16 personalities. It's like, I want to do it Paul style. And
Mm.
so when I'm imitating INFJs, I feel like I'm really, really straining myself to try to have that flowery metaphorical language. And I'm just like, my gosh, when is this take going to be over?
Mm.
But when, say, I'm imitating, say, an INFP or an ISFP, I'm like, this is so much fun. I could do this all day.
Yeah,
Because I'm
interesting.
because I'm calling upon like, okay, I have introverted feeling, they have introverted feeling. I just need to dial it up a notch. But
Mm.
also like when I talk to my INFJ friends, I'll say like, well, because I keep asking you to talk more like a sensor, let me try talking more like an intuitive. So then I'll be like, greetings, oh dearest person that happens to be a friend. How might your day be evolving? And he's just like, that sounds so forced. You're not naturally being intuitive. You're just using your sensing to recall what intuitives sound like. And I'm like, you got me.
Yeah. And that's precisely why, yeah, like we can present sometimes in behaviors as other types. We can never actually be running with those cognitive functions. It's not possible. That's why I firmly believe, like, yeah, you can't change types, especially switch from an S to an N type. Like,
Would be
aside from
hilarious.
those brief moments where I present as an INTJ when I'm like, I really need to get something done, especially if some like NE user is like running behind a schedule that we've set, and I'm like, no, we need to get this done. I can really present as that NTJ type, probably more ENTJ, but it's for a brief moment. It's not my entire personality, you know.
I definitely appreciate how ESFPs do seem to be at least a little bit more in control of their life than the ENFPs do, because I mean, sometimes the types do get mixed up for each other if they don't know the functions really well. They can say both types are really silly. They both like to seek fun. They both like having that diva presence. But
Mm,
when I talk to my ESFP friend on my phone and my ENFP, very, very different because one of them has to be reminded to call me or might like totally forget what she was talking about from 5 minutes ago. The
mm,
other will be like, hey, Paul, this is why I couldn't talk to you because all of these external factors came in. And I'm like, yeah, she's using sensing. The other one is just like, oops, I slept too much.
yeah.
Sorry.
And that's that with the ESFP, that's that NI as well. Like, we can't help. Again, if I know someone else is involved, I will put that in my calendar and I won't be late and I will be there, you know, or there'll be an exception if I'm not there and I will tell you exactly why I wasn't. Like, I can't just forget. That's not, I mean, granted, sorry, I do forget, but like I check my calendar every day. But you know what's interesting is ENFPs, they do have control because they've got that SI inferior. So they
Hmm.
do have control of their life, but it's more the immediate world in front of them, like immediately around them. Whereas we have control over our life in the sense of like it's more natural for us to plan ahead than ENFPs, I think. But my ENFP sister is very good at keeping a controlled environment around her in the present moment, which is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, my ENFP friends have gotten better over the years. Like, my two friends, both ENFPs, when they got married, they were both like the definition of scatterbrained. But she came on the phone. She said, Paul, not only are we getting married, but we got ourselves a planner. I said, you're becoming a J now. Because it was like so foreign to me to think that she was actually planning something out. I
Mm.
was so proud of her at that moment. And it kind of triggered something in me too, because I was like, she tried really hard to become my natural way of being. So maybe I should return the favor. So then, like, when we hung out the next time, I just said, okay, guys, let's do whatever. And they're like, oh, you didn't ask for an agenda. You just went with it. I'm like, yeah, it's okay to have spontaneity every now and then.
I love that. I must say, I've actually admired several times my sister, and I've seen this in other ENFPs. The fact that if they're running behind schedule or their plan isn't it like it's they haven't say they have an event to plan, and this has happened. Like that's why I'm using it as an example. Like my sister's party or wedding or something, right? And the deadline, like the day is coming up, and they're not doing things to actualize the plans in the moment. Now I'm sitting there on the sidelines being like, the date's coming up, you need to get this done, there's these things you said, I know how this is going to turn out for you if you don't do it now. And they just seem so, in my experience, like stress free, and they just kind of like, it'll work out, like I trust in my ability to make it work out, you know. It's kind of like
Yeah.
me, my ability to make this interview work out even though I didn't do it on the spot, like, and without fail every time the event works out. My sister's events always turn out, even if she needs to not sleep 24 hours beforehand, because she gets it all done, bam, bam, bam. And even if it doesn't work out how she said it was going to, she'll be able to spontaneously come up with a new idea on the spot of how this thing is going to work in a different way. Her events are always a hit, and they always come together so nicely. And I'm like, oh, touche. But I love that she doesn't get stressed. And I wish that I envy that a little bit in ENFPs.
That is definitely pretty nice. I mean, I've seen my ENFP friends get stressed out before, but I think it's more of if they have to conform to a routine. Because,
Mm-hmm.
like, my ENFP friend, she's becoming a nurse, and she's always talking about how stressed out she is with her classes and how, like, oh my gosh, I've got like a this many hour work shift. And I keep thinking, how is she a perceiving type? Shouldn't she be used to it? And then I talked to my other ENFP friend who was like going through her introvert crisis moment. You know, every ENFP goes through that where they're like, I think I'm secretly an introvert because I'm actually taking time to think about things. It was because her job was forcing her to be on deadlines and be on a strict schedule, which was conflicting with her inferior function. So then she got a new job that was more free flowing. She's like, I'm an ENFP again, just kidding. So I guess that's where I'd like to segue, because I told you that I had a bit of a time discovering that I was an introvert just because I thought extrovert means you talk a mile a minute. But what it really means is an extrovert means you sort of get your energy and inspiration from exterior sources. So, how did you classify that you were a true extrovert and not just had extroverted functions or extroverted tendencies?
Yeah, interesting. Just the very fact that I can't be home alone for more than 3 hours without
Oh man.
completely losing my energy. Like lockdown, not even kidding to you. Like if I was those days in lockdown, if I was which I was home, not alone, but I was at home every day, and there were people around, but it was my family at the time, and they were getting involved in other things. They had their own things going on. I was getting no external stimuli whatsoever. I promise you, by 3 p.m., I could not even climb the stairs without getting drained. Like that's how much my energy had been sapped from just not being out in the world experiencing things. I've often thought of myself as quite an extreme extrovert because like I can do time alone. Like if you put me in a car, like a drive that's 5 hours, love it. The windows down, even if I'm by myself, the wind in my hair, the music blasted, like that's the epitome of freedom and energy to me. Like I love that.
Okay, you almost had me on that until you said music blasted, and then I'm just like, nope, that hurts my ears too much. But I think that's because extroverted sensing for me is fifth.
Yeah.
So we would get like sensory overload and say like this is too much senses. Whereas I think for you it's like not enough, I need more.
Yeah. Also, yeah, you don't need it. As you said, it's that function you can do, but you don't need. Whereas for me, yeah, the other day I drove for 3 hours and I did that exact thing. Did not turn the music off for the whole 3 hours, and it was on like full volume the whole 3 hours, and the windows were down most of the ride. And I arrived at my destination and I felt so energized. So yes, I was alone in the car, but I was getting that stimuli of extroverted sensing, which is how I have one of the factors that proves that I have SE rather than NE. Like
Hmm.
there were no people in the car with me. There was no connection going on. It was the senses and it was the world that was um, giving me energy. But yeah, if I'm alone and in a house or in a stagnant environment, my energy will sap so fast, it's actually depressing. It's like my weak spot. That's why COVID for me was like, it was horrific.
Interesting. Well, for me, I think discovering that I was a true introvert was always like when I was like being super talkative, it was because it was in a controlled environment. Like I would say, okay, I trust this person. This is a familiar location. It was always going back to that, like, what has happened before. And if it
Mm,
was some place that was like unfamiliar or uncomfortable, I would say, maybe I don't want to talk to people in this environment. And
mm,
so for me, I get stimulation from, I guess, like recalling the best days of my life. So a lot of times, even if I am completely peopled out, if someone is just like, hey, Paul, guess who's at the door? It's that girl you met 11 years ago who I'm up. I'm up because this moment was phenomenal and it's feeding into that database of like, ooh, another song to add to the soundtrack. Ooh, baby. And that's also the ISTJ's biggest weakness because I think that's a lot of times what leads to them making the blunders that they do because I've heard it described, and I can attest to it because I live it. I've heard introverted sensing described as watching two movies at a time. And because only 3% of your vision is actually clear, you have to move your eyes just to see what's right next to you. Like if you've ever tried reading a book without moving your eyes, you can only get like one word in. So
mm,
obviously you can't 100% focus on both screens at a time. So at some point there's going to be overlap where you're like, oh, I missed what happened on that screen. Hold on, let me try again. So a lot of times I might be talking to someone and because I'm so busy being like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, 10 years ago this happened, all of a sudden I'll be transported to my 10 years younger self and say what I said back then. And the other person will be like, what are you talking about? That's not actually happening. And I'll be like, oh, sorry, it's just that you reminded me of 10 years ago. So I forgot that you weren't her kind of thing.
gosh, that's hectic.
Yeah,
God.
so it can get pretty wild sometimes. Like when I was with my ex-girlfriend who turned out to be a piece of work. I'll tell you about her another day, but one time she was yelling at me so much that I like literally called her by another girl's name who also yelled at me a lot. And I said, leave me alone, you fill in the blank name.
Ooh,
I just got so trapped in that past trauma that I was reliving it.
gosh, that's hectic. Wow.
Yeah. So what would you say your equivalent of that would be, where your biggest strength can also be your weakness?
Interesting. Biggest strength of an extrovert, I would of an extroverted sensor of an ESFP is being present in the moment, which has so many downfalls. Like, I mean, it's so problematic when you're present in the moment. You forget things, other things that you have to be doing. It's like you also make you might be making a connection with a person, and that person reads it as like real long-term connection that they've just made a lifelong friend for life. But in my head, I'm like, sounds so bad, but like you could be anyone right now. Like I could be fine to never talk to you again after this, because it's like about the experience I'm sharing with the person. Sorry, the experience that I'm having and a person is there rather than I'm connecting with the person. Does that make sense? So I'm really good at bringing other people into my world, into the present moment and having fun. And I know a lot of people value that in me. And I've been told like, that I'm a, a really good entertainer and a good party person. And I think a lot of people value that. But I mean, just last night we had a party and I was straight back in like my element. Like parties are my absolute element. But like I was straight back into that like distracted, this thing's going on now, this thing's going on. And like you can't have a deep conversation with me at a party as a result, because I'm so wanting to experience everything that if you're trying to tell me something deep, my brain just does not want to prioritize that. Like my brain wants to prioritize all the stimuli and all the fun things that I could be doing. And the experience of meeting that new person who I've never met before, but only to have small talk with them or to have banter and a few jokes, not to go super deep, you know? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I can think of at the top of my head.
So I need to backtrack for a minute. my brain tends to think about things very literally. So when you said, I might not necessarily want to keep talking to you, were you saying you as a generalized example, or were you saying that you would feel perfectly okay if you and I never talked again?
No, generalized, sorry.
Okay, that's good.
Fair, I'm glad you clarified. No, generalizations. The amount of times, just to give you a more concrete example, I will have like a really, because again, like with ESFPs and especially me, I find I really wear my heart on my sleeve, and I'm okay with sharing my personal experiences and insights and perspectives and my heart with someone I've just met, because I just have no, like I have reservations in some areas, especially now as I'm an older person. But when I was younger, there was no filter and it was problematic for several reasons. But I might have, as a result, like a really good experience with someone where I share something with them and then they read it as like, oh, wow, this woman's opening up to me. I can open up to her. Right. And then we share this awesome time, and that person's putting more value on the depth of conversation than I am just naturally. Right. Then the night will be over and I'll resume my life, because ESFPs are so, I think we're kind of, it's very classic of us to be terrible at keeping in contact with people, because it's actually kind of like a chore for me to reply to emails or especially long messages. And I'm just like, no, I'm sorry, to sit down and be in that world and like reply to everything you've said in the email.
And that's
I'd
why you
rather,
took so long to respond to my email.
oh, a little shot there. Yeah, no, that's true. But that's something we're not great at, and the friends that I have in my life, God bless them, understand that about me and they accept that about me, and I really appreciate that. And I have quite a few successful long distance relationships, which is huge for me because I'm not naturally good at that. But anyway, so yeah, so as a result, what happens is we'll connect with someone and then we'll just drop off the face of the earth for that person. And
Yeah.
I've had people reach out to me and be like, hey, like, we had that really good night and then you just never messaged me. Like, I'm not talking about, just to be clear, like romantic relationships. I'm talking about like
Right,
friendship.
yeah.
Like we bonded that night and then like I just didn't hear from you. And I'm like, oh, this is my classic. This is classic. I need to not open up so much or share so much off the bat with someone. So that's been like a learning curve for me. Or if I really have connected with someone, to actually go out of my way to message them and check up on them, because to some people that really matters. Whereas to me, it's so hard to get into that sit down and focus on this message when it's not, when there's so many more real, tangible, sensory things that are commanding my attention, you know? So
Yeah.
if I'm maintaining a good, like a long distance or any kind of like virtual relationship with you, it means like you have a place in my FI heart. I care about you a lot, you know. But it's definitely had its downfalls of people thinking I don't care about them, or like getting mad at me for not keeping tabs on them or replying or seeing them like so much. And it then has like the problem of now I then start to feel trapped, and I can't help it, but like I start to feel trapped in relationships, like I'm being kept tabs on, which I think for ESFPs is a terrible feeling. And so you've got this weird thing of like, in order to be friends with me, you have to just accept that I'm not going to meet certain expectations that you have of how often I need to keep in contact with you. But I can try, but the upside is that I will literally always care for you, and I will always be there for you. And like, this is, if you need me to be there or you want to come hang out with me and we haven't seen each other in 4 years, it's going to be as if I saw you yesterday, you know?
That is almost word for word exactly what my ESFP friend would say, because she is also very terrible at getting back to me. We were supposed to make plans this past November, still hasn't contacted me in any form. And I was just really mad at her for the last couple of weeks. And I was just like, if she's not going to make the effort, maybe I don't want to make the effort. But
Mm.
now that I realize what functionology is going on, maybe I should give her another chance.
Oh, yes,
That
please.
didn't, it didn't mean that I wanted to get her out of my life. I don't like the concept of door slamming is not something I like to do, but
Mm.
more so of just, I wanted to take a break because most of my friends are either really forgetful or really intuitive. So I'm usually the one that's pushing for the connections. And they're like, huh, what? We were messaging? Oh, sorry, I totally forgot. And I'm like, just for once, can someone else do the remembering? Because ISTJs and ISFJs have by far the best memories of any type. So of course,
Yes.
if we're always remembering everything, we're always going to have kind of a hostility to people that don't. Like, if you take any type, it seems like they tend to like kind of undermine types that have a weaker function. Like you take ESTJs, they'll criticize people for, oh, how stupid can you get? The ESFPs might say, come on, have a little fun. And
Mm.
that's where the ISTJ comes in. They'll be like, can you remember anything?
Yes. And you can imagine how someone who doesn't understand MBTI or the functions whatsoever would just look at an ESFP and be like, you're a space cadet. Like, can't you just remember something for once? Like, I don't even want to have you in my life, you know? So that's why MBTI is so helpful. And you've hit the nail on the head as well with what you just said about understanding what functionality is going on and being like, I totally think, yes, your friend, just if she's not contacting you, that doesn't, I could honestly name 5 friends right now off the top of my head who I know I'm currently doing that too, who are sitting there going like, Kristin hasn't replied to me in a while or contacted me in a while. And like, I'm getting so much better at setting aside time to sit down in a like white room with no distractions and message people, because I know that's something. But unfortunately, like, my brain just naturally thinks of it as like a chore, like something that I don't necessarily want to do. But the fact that I am doing it, or like when you do get messages, like, or even if they try, yeah, they like, we might forget or something else might come up. But if we're trying, and if you've made your way into our FI heart, you're not leaving. Like, we will care about you forever. We're terrible at executing plans. Like, I've been told by all my friends, like, you suck at replying, or like, you never make plans. But I have such love for those people who still keep me around and still say yes when I do say, hey, do you want to come on a spontaneous trip right now? And they're like, cool, haven't heard from you in a few months, but let's do it. You know, like, I have so
Yeah.
much love.
I
Yeah.
mean, I thought that that was exclusive to ISTJs, that intense loyalty that you described, but I think we just express it differently. Like how we express loyalty is because we live in that introverted sensing world. We never, ever, ever, ever forget that deep connection. And so every single day we'll be thinking, it's been 365 days since I last heard from that person. Check another box. Check another box for this person being forgetful. And like
God.
constantly internalizing this, like, how can they be such a failure at communication? And the introverted feeling is just crushed because it's like, I remembered their birthday and I remembered their hair color and I remembered their sob story. They can't even remember what I said yesterday.
Oh gosh, that's where it starts. Like, I totally get it. I totally get it. It must be frustrating to be friends, like, for an SI user to be friends with those more sort of flighty types. But like, yeah, I think on behalf of all ESFPs, please, please understand and extend that grace to us, because our way of showing love is just so different, I think, from how different types would show love. And again, that's why I'm such a like advocate for understanding MBTI, because you can just really give each other leniency there.
Yeah, because before understanding MBTI, I would have probably said, like, is there anything redeeming about ENTJs? They're just awful.
I love ENTJs, not gonna lie. I think
Oh,
they're great.
wow.
Probably because they have all 4 of my functions. So
Oh,
like, we
wow.
in the same. So
I think I just would get tired of them, like, just constantly being like, all the time. And I'd be like, chill out, take a day off, talk in a soft voice, be easygoing. Let's stop being so uptight about everything.
but like, it's like just their functions. It doesn't mean their behavior is going to be bad. Their brain might be like, but if they're like a nice person who's practiced like temperance and virtue and like self-development, they might not like outwardly express that. In fact, one of my housemates is ENTJ, and she's such a kind and patient person. You can see that she runs with TE, but she's just really worked on developing virtue. And like, I would entreat you to give ENTJs another chance.
I mean, it is a running meme on my channel that I talk down on ENTJs a lot and will make like the ENTJs are evil jokes. And I did a Super Smash Brothers Ultimate video where I did like what would each type be as a Smash Brothers character, and the ENTJ got Ganondorf. So, but on the other hand, like I had an ex-boss who was an ENTJ, and we had our differences, but there were times where I really, really respected him and appreciated his confidence. And then there's a friend of mine, which admittedly I don't see very much, but when we do talk, I mean, she's not the most emotionally open person in the world. Like my other feeling type friends would be like, Paul, buddy, give me a hug. She'll just be like, hey, Paul, what's up? And then like, you ready to hang out? Just this very cold, detached method. But if I were to say like, hey, my day's going terrible, she'd be like, oh no, anything I can do to solve the problem? And because she's Roman Catholic, that's given her that incentive to practice that extroverted feeling and to try to be like, okay, even though this person is being stupid, I really ought to hear them out.
Hmm. And that's like, yeah, I'm with you. Like, yeah, being Catholic as well has like helped me so much to be like, no, we don't engage in this sensory thing right now because it's bad for our soul.
Yeah. So we called this an interview, but we actually haven't really talked about either of our channels very much. We've mostly been talking about each other and functionality. And before we recorded this, we talked about how our different cultures have different types of drinks. So I want to like talk about maybe a brief version. We can talk more in depth later, but like, how would you say being an ESFP has helped your channel stand out among other Myers-Briggs channels? And how do you see like your personality coming across more as opposed to because you do so many skits, people will not know what type you really are?
Hmm. 100%. I think the upper hand that my personality has for my channel is the fact that I am naturally, as an ESFP, good at I guess performing or acting and taking in those really nuanced facial expressions and body language and gestures that people of different types have. So I think the reason why people have enjoyed my channel, and they've said as much in the comments, is my ability to embody the other types as well. So the fact that I can physically present as other types just for that moment that I'm acting them out, people have enjoyed that and been able to say like, so they've been able to be like, okay, now I can understand not just what someone of this type would say, but maybe visually or in their body language or gestures how they would present. Now I don't think I'm perfect at it, and I really would like to perfect it more. Like there are some types in my life who like I don't have many ISFJs in my life. So, for instance, when it gets to the ISFJ, I'm kind of just like replicating a subdued version of the ESFJ. So, I'd love to like really get better at presenting those even more nuanced sort of things in like body language and facial expressions and micro expressions. But I think that's definitely a strength of my channel, in that I can present not just that, but like a good energy, which is just an ESFP strength. It's just, I think, one of our strengths. And yeah, for a while, I just wanted to keep uploading skits. Like comedy is sort of like my comfort zone. And the idea of putting my actual personality and my heart out there was a little bit like, more so because I was like, do I really have that much to give in terms of my actual personality? Like, I think comedy is something people enjoy, but then people started to say like would love to see you talk like as yourself or something. And some people in my life suggest I do that. So I released like a few more videos of me as my actual personality. But sometimes I doubt what my actual personality is because I just feel like I'm constantly performing. Like, but yeah,
ESFPs are the divas after all.
yes, you know it.
How would you say you would like to take Catholicism forward on your channel? Are you going to do more Catholic-centered videos, or are you going to ever incorporate your faith into the Myers-Briggs? Like talk about how it can be intertwined in some aspects.
Yeah, good question. I definitely have no qualms about presenting my spirituality on the channel, and I've not made any effort to take down any of the like crucifixes or rosary beads in my video.
Yeah, I
And
totally noticed all of them, by the way.
yeah, and the crucifix that I usually wear, but it's broken at the moment, need to get it fixed. I've literally no qualms, and I very much believe in And like some people have asked in my comments, are you Catholic? I'm like, yeah, and I've got into good conversations with them. And someone even asked, like, why are you so happy? And I mentioned my Christianity. Like it's very much part of my life and who I am. That being said, being an ESFP and being a perceiver, my natural vibe is like not to impose my beliefs or religion onto anyone. And also personally, just in my heart, I very much believe in spreading the message of Christ through example. You know, I think it was St. Paul who said, preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. You
I
know,
could have sworn
so
that was
very,
St. Francis that said that, but close
yes, I'm
enough.
wrong. I'm wrong then. You are correct. I was like, St. Paul. Just misquoting people. Love that. Yeah, so I super believe in presenting as an example, which is why I'm super, without overtly Bible bashing to quote, not that I think people who talk more openly about the faith on their channels are Bible bashing, but for me, in my own life, I have a lot of secular friends, and they have often said to me how they appreciate my Christianity in the sense that I endeavor to be virtuous and loving and giving and kind, and they can see a difference. So at the moment, I'm happy to sort of just bring in the universal message of goodness to my channel, because ultimately God is goodness and he is love. And so bringing that into my message in my videos in my channel is bringing, I believe, God and Christian principles into the channel in and of itself, which is why I've released videos such as You're More Than Your MBTI type, sort of explaining like how beautiful people are and unique and to use it for good and all that. So I imagine I'll keep it on that trajectory, and maybe down the track when I guess maybe I have sensed that people have a greater interest in me as a person or my actual convictions, I might release a more explicit video about it. But at the moment, classic, living in the moment, haven't thought about the future, don't actually know properly.
That's totally fair, because when I first started YouTube, I was just like, oh, I'll just make a bunch of songs. That didn't happen. So the future can change. I have made a couple of songs, but I don't think I made as many as I thought I would. So, and I also didn't think I'd be getting out of depression when I did. And that really like if you watch my videos like pre 2016 to post 2016, you'll see a humongous difference.
Oh, wow.
So I guess we can wrap this up here. So I'll do an outro for my audience, and then we can do a personal outro of like where to go from here, and then we can call it a night. How about that?
Awesome.
All right. So audience, thank you very much for your time, especially if you sat through this whole thing. Like, dang, you've got some perseverance. Thank you, Kristin, for taking this time to have our first conversation and make it be so graceful in its flow. I was really worried that you would think I was too boring or that I wasn't speaking up enough, but it turned out that the mutual sensing and the mutual Catholicism really helped a lot. And I'm grateful that we had such a rare opportunity to happen almost effortlessly.
Yeah, I
Do you
really
have
enjoyed
any do you have any closing words you'd like to say to my audience, especially if feel free to shamelessly plug your own channel if you want to.
Well, thank you, audience, for watching this interview. Thank you, Paul, for having me. It was a lot of fun. I am under the name Dear Kristin on YouTube. And if you'd like to look more into sort of, I guess, the message that I have for the MBTI community about how it needs to be used for growth, not so much as like an excuse for behavior, feel free to jump on my channel and look at those videos. But yeah, thank you for watching. If you watched this much, good on you. And
Yeah, and if you guys are the forgetful types, I'll put a link in the description just in case just hearing her say that is not enough.
fair enough.
Alrighty, so at this point, this is when the video will cut. So see you later, audience.